Hello, everybody. It is the Skeptic and the Mystic, and it is episode 37. And tonight, Deb and I are super excited because we have a special guest with us. And she is going to be schooling us. Well, I'll definitely be schooled because this is a topic that I don't really know much about. I know Deb is way more versed in this, but we are going to be talking to Celeste Hartwell. And Celeste, just to give you a little bit of background about her, Celeste had an 18-year career in corporate. She decided to jump off the ledge of safety and security into the unknown of entrepreneurship, where she then fell into listening to others for how to run her business, even when those well-intentioned people were guiding her against her internal knowing. I have to say something about that later. But so she's now passionate about helping women step into their own brilliance through cultivating a relationship with their intuition so they feel excited and energized about living a life without compromise. She owns a company and hosts a podcast by the title Divine Feminine Leaders, where she works with women to step out of overwhelm, guilt, and shame to shine brightly and attract all they desire. And we'll have to put a link in that because she interviewed me on hers last week. So we're super excited. I want to say, just you're talking about like listening to others and how to run their business. I've been noticing that so much. And like my coach telling me, you need to do this. And I'm like, this doesn't feel right. So there's so much to be said about like having somebody guide you to listen to yourself versus saying, this is how you should do it. That's a whole other tangent. But we are going to be talking tonight about oracle cards and how to use them for your business and for your life. So Celeste, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Gosh, absolutely. And as Devin mentioned when we first got on, she's like, oh, she's legit in her podcasting setup. We love that. Tell us about oracle cards. Like if somebody never heard what an oracle card is, like how would you describe them?
So let me just preface this with like, I don't know all the things about oracle cards. Like that question kind of scares me a little bit. But they're different from tarot in that what I do know, I'll share that. What I do know is that they're different from tarot in that tarot has like a very specific count, right? Like it's 22 trump cards and it's 4 suits of like kind of almost like similar to a card deck in a way, except for the additional of the 22 trump cards, the major arcana. And so
all that you just said, I was just like, I don't even know what that is.
I think that's all I know too. Like I don't even know enough about tarot to really talk about it intelligently. Like I just know what I've read.
With perfect authority though. You're spot on.
So oracle cards are a little bit, so to back up, tarot cards are clearly a tool of divination and oracle cards are as well. And what I mean by divination is it's a tool to tap into the energy that is source, that is your higher power, your own intuition, and one of those tools. And so I think you were asking about like what are oracle cards. Every author, every artist who creates a deck kind of does it a little bit differently. So it doesn't have what I was saying about tarot, like it doesn't have the same structure necessarily. Oracle cards are kind of much more at the author's whim, at the artist's whim of like, what do I feel led to, tap into and share in this deck. And they're just like a really fun way to tap into the energy about whatever you want to tap into, like whatever intention that was. And what came up for me when you were reading the bio and then you were talking about like having a coach kind of telling you how you should do things is that I learned recently that you can actually utilize the oracle cards to tap into the energy of your business, which is like really mind-blowing, and you can do it for like anything that you're having an issue with. So that is where I'm really excited to go tonight with you guys.
So, okay. The other day I was with a friend and I have this deck and I don't know if this is considered an oracle deck or not. I still don't know.
It'll say.
Oh yeah, it does say, it says oracle cards. So it's the Sacred Traveler. And he pulled it and it was, I don't even know if the one would come out, but it was basically like a rising phoenix. Yeah, it was like transformation, new beginnings. And he was like, that's crazy because we had been in an ayahuasca ceremony like a weekend before, and he had seen a phoenix in the clouds. And then something else came up another time where, like a Facebook post where he saw a phoenix, and then he pulled this and he's like, holy heck, like it keeps following me. And the tiny little bit that I know about cards, like people say that seems to happen, like, with cards, like it just kind of gives confirmation. I mean, is that kind of what it is? It's just giving a confirmation, or?
I think that it depends. I want to start off this conversation with, it depends on what your intention is. And I say that because I think, Heather, you and I had this conversation last week after we recorded your podcast episode for my podcast, which was, I had this very codependent relationship with cards and divination tools for a while, which was that I had to use them. Like there was like this, it was dependence. It was like I didn't trust my own intuition and I didn't trust what my guidance was. And so I was using these tools as a crutch. And what ended up happening to me over a lot of drama, I ended up not being able to travel with all of my tools when I was going to be doing this moon ceremony and all of this stuff. And when I tuned in and I was like, why is this happening? What I heard was, you don't need that shit. And I was like, okay. And so
I love that. I just want to kind of, double tap on that thing. I hate that expression, but with any of these tools, crystals, anything like that, that's always what I would say to people too, is just be careful that you don't rely on them or, use them as a way to not listen to yourself. Right. I think and I think a lot of people do that. So it just depends on where people are in their journey. Yeah. And so like for me, I was using them as a crutch. And then when I heard you don't need that shit, then I was like, okay, so I took a step back from everything. Like, not that I still didn't love crystals and collect them, and I love essential oils and like I like all the pretty things and all of that. And I did over time still feel called to accumulate more oracle card decks, but I wasn't utilizing them because I didn't know why they wanted me yet. And I think that's the thing. Like I recently, I was telling you a little bit before we got on, like, and I just said it was, I recently learned about, I had a meeting with this gentleman that I had just met, and he said, well, you can like tap into the tarot every morning and just ask your business questions through the tarot. And I was like, what? Like, because I know that like our businesses and our projects have their own energy and their own life force. Like I've felt that for years, but the idea that like my business actually wants to communicate with me using this tool was like so far removed from me. So I'm kind of giving all the secrets away in the beginning, but what I started doing was I had been called to this Divine Feminine Oracle deck from Megan Watterson a couple years ago. I was led to buy this and I never really resonated with it. I was like, oh, it's pretty, Divine Feminine. I mean, that's my company name, but I don't know why I have this deck. And when he said that, I was like, my business just picked out her own deck.
That's crazy.
Isn't that wild? Like, and it was like a mind-blowing moment. So now I've been tuning in to my business every morning being like, okay, who do you need me to be today?
I love that. Have you ever done like a chart reading for your business too, or any of those things?
I haven't yet. And I feel like that's a rabbit hole, Deb, that I just don't know that I can go down. I'm really queen of the rabbit holes, and I'm like, I don't think I'm ready for that one yet.
Yeah. Wait, Deb, I don't even know what this is. What are you talking about? Because
you can pull like a birth chart, a natal chart for your business. And you can base it on, whatever date you feel like is the date that you officially launched it. It could be when you launched your website. It could be when you sent your first email. It could be when you booked your first paid client, whatever that feels like to you.
Right.
Sorry, there's a little gnat around my head. But it's, a rabbit hole. I'm going to only go this far down and then we're going to get back to what we're talking about. But yeah, it's freaking crazy. Because I've had a chart reading on my business and I was like, God, why do I feel like I can't get this stupid little baby to walk? I was just like, what is wrong with this thing? And anyway, in having my reading,
I mean, the energy of the chart was very telling. So it's kind of crazy. Yeah.
It's fascinating.
On who you got that from, because I would be curious to do that for mine too. That would be very
I think on Instagram she's Brooklyn High Priestess of Brooklyn. I don't know. I'll look it up and I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So Celeste, you're saying like every morning just tapping in and just asking your business who you need to be. Which anybody like watching this knows like that's one of my favorite questions ever. Like, you know, people are always like, well, I don't know what I need to do. And I'm like, ask who do you need to be? Like that is like Deb can tell you, like it's not like what are your goals? Now how do I do this? It's who do you need to be for it? So I love that. And so basically you can just say who do I need to be, and then just go to your card deck and just like see what comes up and then step into that identity, you know, for the day. That's the basic gist of it.
Yeah, basically, I mean, I tend to ask her like 3 different questions. So one of them is who do I need to be? Right? And then I'll the last time that I pulled that, I'm sure it's right on top. No, that was for something different. But because I do it for the podcast now every single day that I do a podcast. So, you know, today it was Ariadne, and she is the mistress of the labyrinth. My soul knows the way. The only way out is through. And, you know, so I'm like, okay. But the other day it was, oh my God. Okay, I'm not going to do it justice, so I'm not going to mess it up. It was one of those like Mary Magdalene, everything is love or whatever. Like it was just like very profound, and I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I need to do. I just need to be in my heart all day, right? Like I just need to show up. So I ask her, who do I need to be? I also ask her, and by her I do mean my business, the energy of my business or the podcast, whichever one I'm working with, and for me they're by the same name, so they're the same energy. I also ask, who do you want to be? Who are you becoming? Because she is a separate energy than I am. And so respecting that we're both playing in this field together. And then the third question that I ask is, what do I need to do to move forward? What is my next step, basically?
I love that.
So sometimes I get the next step from the card, and sometimes I just intuitively get the next step. And I just want to say, for like shuffling the cards, I shuffle the cards typically until something jumps out, or when I just feel like, okay, it's time to pull the card, right? Like there's no right or wrong with this. And I think that when we're starting to work with these types of tools, we often like overthink it. Or like I would pull a card before and I'd go, that's not right. You know, like put it back when that's not true. Like that was the perfect card for me in the moment. But my ego was like, no, I'm not working on that. That's not me. So just like kind of leaning in.
Yeah. Have you ever done that though? And then you get the same card right back. You're like, oh, okay.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I get it.
Yeah. Would you stop already? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I forget, I took a course earlier this year about like intuitive, and it was like an intuitive intensive, and they were talking about all the different ways that people like do this. And it's like some people, I don't have one close by, but like, you know, I grew up, as I've talked to before on this podcast before, but I grew up in a conservative Christian home, and there are people who they'll take their Bible and they're like, okay, God, just give me a message, you know, flip through a page, and they're like, point on a verse, right? But and people then in that realm are like, oh, this is fine because it's from the Bible, you know, so they think like, oh, I could do that. This is essentially the same thing, trusting, this is my understanding, trusting that anything like came directly from God. And so whether it's a deck of cards, you know, the Bible, which I know for some people what I'm saying right now is blasphemy. But when we look at it, like everything, you know, ultimately came through the creator, whether it's a deck of cards or the Bible, you know, you're just asking for some sort of guidance that if you sat there and meditated, you know, and just got quiet and listened, that answer would still come through to you. It's just like a faster way to like, just show me a card, just being faster.
It is. And I think it's also a learning tool for people who don't necessarily hear or feel the answers right away or see the answers, right? Like if you haven't honed in on your intuition enough or taken the time, I mean, I've really like dove into that work, which is why I was guided years ago to be like, stop using them for a while. And I was really tentative to start using them again because I was like, I kind of got my hands slapped a little bit, like, do I really go back to this?
I love that. Celeste, I have a question for you. When you, because I think I probably have more tarot decks than I do oracle decks, but I do some similar things sometimes just in the morning, like what's the energy I need to embody today or whatever. But one thing that I have started doing, I'm just curious your thoughts on it, is particularly once you get to know a certain deck, this is even easier, but sometimes I try doing it even before, is I will just pull the card and I'll just see what it tells me on its own. I don't necessarily always go right to the guidebook. I don't know if maybe we didn't touch on that, but for anybody who doesn't know, most decks will always come with a guidebook that further explains. I guess in an oracle deck, it would be the artist's intention behind that. But a lot of times you can look at that piece of art and get some meaning. Right. It's actually crazy to me how often it does relate to what they were trying to incorporate. But sometimes I would see things that maybe aren't part of what's described in that guidebook, but I still see it as a message for me. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I love that because, Deb, that is like you're trusting your intuition before you trust the guidebook, which again, I think the guidebook can be a little bit of a crutch. And to be completely honest, I kind of use it as a crutch, but I also look at the guidebook and I just pick out the phrases that like I feel really drawn to, right? Like I don't read it verbatim all the time, and I will actually take notes. So I'll say like today is the 10th, I asked, who do I need to be? This is the card that came up. And these are the phrases out of the guidebook that I really felt like I really needed to hear today. That was who I needed to be. And the same thing, right? Like, so I love it that you're being more patient with it. You're like, what do I feel from this? And I would agree, like whatever comes up for you is true for you. I think that's the thing, like people, right. At least like when I started my journey, it was always this questioning of like, oh, I got this intuitive hit, but was that really an intuitive hit? Or was I like making that up? Or am I crazy? Like, of course I'm crazy. But, that whole thing of questioning ourselves because we've been taught to think logically, to be left brain, to, not.
Absolutely. It gets squashed when we're kids. When we see an imaginary friend and everyone tells you that that's not a thing. So you shut that down real quick because you learn it's weird if you keep saying that, Yeah. I like that. I did, I think it was maybe the month of March. I did actually like a spreadsheet and tracked a daily read, like just one card read every day. And I just, whatever question came to me, life questions, whatever. And I didn't really have any rhyme or reason to what question I was going to ask, but I, kept this spreadsheet, and it was pretty incredible how many times within the course of that month that I would ask a question that I had asked previously and get the same card. Like, how could that? I mean, I was just pulling from an animal spirit deck. But that's where it's like kind of just like, okay, there is something to this. Like, it does seem like if I were asking a question about, I can't think of what questions I asked now, but like if I would ask about like, oh, am I going to meet like a special someone or something, like I would get the same answer, like stop asking the damn question. We already told you, you know what I mean? It's so interesting.
I love getting those messages. It's like, do we have to have this conversation again, Celeste? Yeah. Like, really? Exactly. Do you really, like, you're continuing to question us? Like, we've told you, right?
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, Heather.
Nope, you go.
No, I was just going to say, I love what you're saying, Deb, too. And I wanted to bring up, too, like, I have actually started to, I think, not just for the business, but so here's another funny deck that I was led to get. I had like won a deck at a party. This is like magical messages from the fairies. I won this deck at a party from an astrologer who I adore a couple years back when we were in person. And I got this deck home and I went, I don't like this deck. Like the fairies are really judgy. Like, I don't know if anybody knows anything about fairies, but fairies are really judgmental. They're like, you should be eating vegetarian. Like, they have really strong opinions, and this deck has really strong opinions in it.
I think Heather would like that deck. I'm just kidding.
Judgy fairy deck, Heather.
Judgy fairy deck. You really think I'm judgy, Deb?
No, I'm teasing you. Only because she had to throw out that everybody should eat vegan. I don't know. I just thought that was kind of funny.
The only thing I think that everybody should eat is stay away from refined sugar and processed foods. Anything other than that, like, I'm like, eat what you want, eat like vegan or eat paleo, but stay away from processed foods.
I think the fairies agree with you, Heather. Like, I'm just telling you.
Everybody should be vegan. I don't think that at all.
No. I'm just teasing you. That was just funny.
I have strong opinions. I will give you that.
Yeah.
But to go back to the judgy fairies, so like I realized after I got this home, I was like, I don't even like this deck. Like, why was I called to get this deck? This deck was the deck that I was called to get that day when I won it. And I brought it home and it sat for a couple weeks. And then somebody was like, hey, you do energy healing, don't you? And I was like, yeah, I do. And they were like, my dog really needs energy healing. He is freaking out at every little thing, scared of my fiance, like blah, 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 blah. And it was this deck. So like this deck is now relegated to like any animal work that I do because the fairies love the animals. Is why they want everybody to be vegetarian. They really love the animals. And so it's one of those things where sometimes we're called to get things we don't understand why in the moment. But then it works out like, oh, this is my animal rating deck. Like, so I think like some of this is like communication or tuning into like, what do I feel called to do in this moment? And not even asking why. Like, I just feel called to get the judgy fairies right now.
So I'm curious, what did the fairies say about her dog, and did it tell her that she should break up with the fiance?
Oh no. I mean, the fairies were very helpful in healing the dog. And so the dog was like really he was just scared. Like we weren't sure if he had some trauma before they homed him, but he was afraid of everything. Any little noise, he would cower. Like she sent me pictures of him. And so the fairies actually helped me completely like dissipate the energy. You know, I went up and I also know theta healing. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
I got the book after you recommended it. I'm starting to read it. So I want to start incorporating that.
So for anyone who doesn't know, theta healing is an energetic healing where you go up to source. They call it the creator of all it is. It's, by the way, whatever religion you believe, it's one energy. And you go up and you can heal people on a physical level, mental level, emotional level, spiritual level. And it's very, very powerful. And so I went up and communicated with this dog and figured out what was going on and shifted what was going on, of course, with his owner's permission, with his permission, because I believe in permission and getting, consent. Yes, thank you. That was the word. And that day when her fiance came home, he was like, what happened to the dog? He did not even know that I had done the healing, but he was like, this is a different dog. Now the dog is like big and like even though he's like this big, right? Like he's super tiny. But he like he was no longer afraid of the fiance. Now they're married. Like dog was like super confident right afterwards. So the fairies were very helpful, and theta healing, but it was really powerful.
That's amazing. I love all this stuff and still like because I've done energy work too with animals and I see the difference. So I'm like, totally believe it. Then there's still that other part of me that's like, this is a bunch of horseshit and like, it's so ridiculous. But it's like, why can't, like, I guess I'm saying this more for myself, but like, why can't we believe, like, why do we think that healing had to have ended when Jesus left the earth? And why do we think that like, we don't have the ability to help heal that? And I love in the theta healing, I skipped to the chapter of like why people don't heal because I wanted to like really get into that person. Like, and especially like right now where everybody is so focused on like getting ill or staying, trying to avoid a virus that like everybody's going to get a virus at some point, like, and at the end of the day, we're all going to die. Like, why do we think that dying is not healing? Like dying can be the most healing thing in the world. Because that's the end of the soul's contract. And we think it's such a terrible thing when really like that's the soul's like, okay, I'm done. And that's great. And it's beautiful. And I don't know. But so the skeptical part of me is like, this is a bunch of horseshit, and and like, how do I learn to like, if I want to use these to listen to my intuition, or like, why should I even trust my intuition to grow my business or help my life?
I feel like there's a softer way to step into it than what you're saying, which is like, I have to trust these tools to take my life forward or to take my business forward. And I would just invite you to play with it and experiment with it. And you don't have to be like, I totally believe all of this, even though like clearly you don't, right? Like don't hammer it in when you don't believe it. But I think there's this beauty and this softness to just being open to. I'm open to seeing how this works. I'm open to experimenting with these cards for the next weeks, months, whatever, to see like, is that true? What if I just followed my intuition for a little bit?
Yeah. And I would kind of, piggyback on that and try just keeping a simple journal, spreadsheet, something. Because I think it's very easy when you're skeptical to write it off or forget. I don't know if you have this experience sometimes, Celeste, but and I don't have a daily practice of pulling a card. I do it a lot of days. But oftentimes I pull it in the morning and I'm like, okay, that's the energy I want to take forward today, or this is the thing I need to know, or whatever it is. And by noon, it's not top of mind anymore. So keeping like a spreadsheet or something that encourages me to go back and reflect, that's a nice way to see where there was some truth, right? Or where there was something, especially if you are skeptical or new to the practice. I think it's a good way to just see, oh, maybe that did play out for me today,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like, doing it in the morning and then checking in briefly at night, just writing one sentence about like, how did this actually like portray, how did this actually show up in my day?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and I feel like that's how I got into doing energy work, because I was like, I don't know, I think it's kind of ridiculous, but why not try it? And I kept seeing results with people. And I think that lack of attachment to an outcome like helped me better than feeling like I had to have some kind of outcome with it. I was always like, hope this works, and then people be like, oh my gosh, and I'm like, okay, I guess there's something here, but like not getting attached to like, I have to have the answers of healing, just trusting the process, and trusting that what comes through, is what it's supposed to be. But so when you think about like intuition, I want to talk about just intuition for a minute, and with women and their businesses and life. Because as Deb said, like, we're so indoctrinated. Like, we go to school and it's like, here, read this, memorize this, spit it back out, right? Unless you went to a Waldorf school or a Montessori school, you're typically not like, you haven't been taught how to listen to your intuition. And for me, I feel like intuition comes a lot with experience. Like, it's not something that just happens. Like, as a chef, like, I can intuitively know what a tablespoon or a teaspoon of salt is, right? But somebody who's never cooked before, they don't know, because they haven't had to measure out a tablespoon of salt so many times that they just intuitively know. So it's like there's experience that has to happen to really like intuitively know something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's true. It's a muscle.
Right. So when you're working with women in learning their intuition, what would you say is one of the biggest blocks that they have from trusting the message that they get, whether it's from the oracle cards or from themselves?
So I'm sneaky around helping them get into their intuition. So can we just say that? Like, can I just be honest about that? Which is, I really focus more on like what really gives you joy, and how did you like to play when you were a child, and how did that feel, and how can you create that feeling again in your life right now? Because some people want to learn how to tap into their intuition,
Some people are very, very clear about that. A lot of time my clients aren't that clear that that's what they're really desiring. They just want to hit a financial goal. They just want to get the love of their life. They just want to, you know what I mean? Like create these different outcomes in their life that they just know that they don't know how to get there and that I've gotten there. And so they just want to get there. So so let me follow Celeste. Let me work with Celeste to do that. And I really focus on enjoy the shit out of your life. Like literally, like treat yourself like the queen that you are. How can we, you know what I mean? And so there is definitely like with the work that I do, because I do focus on bliss and ironing out like shadow stuff and like moving out, there can be this issue with havingness. How much good can I feel? How much good am I allowed to have? But it is in the good, it's in like the joy that we feel that the intuition just comes through without even looking for it, right? Like we just get led to do things and we don't know why, we just do it, right? So I am sneaky in my teaching.
I like that.
Sneaky or wise.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
It's a sneaky or wise.
Well, maybe a little column A and a little bit of column B.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I think it is smart though, because there is so much the programming or the attitude around that seems, I mean, the mystical stuff. This is kind of part of why we even do this podcast, is to demystify those things that are so mystical, because people are afraid to trust it or admit that they want to trust it. But when you come at it like, you know, kind of backwards, I love that. That's brilliant, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point about something else that we have never been taught. Well, very few of us have been taught is to like do the somatic work of getting into our bodies and feeling the sensations in our bodies, right? When we feel an emotion, like we typically will like just, you know, instead of like, let me drop in, notice where it is in my body. Notice if there's a temperature. Is there a texture? Is there a voice? What's it saying to me? Okay? And when we can do that, we can dissipate that so much faster. But we haven't been taught that. We just go, you know, responding, and what we think about that emotion is what drives our life, instead of just taking time to just be with the emotion without judging it. And the more that we judge it, like the harder it is to tap into our intuition, because
right.
we're making something of nothing, essentially, instead of just like, oh, it's a feeling and let it be. Then there's space for creativity, instead of, oh my gosh, I feel this way and I shouldn't have felt this way. Blah, blah, blah. We have to learn to get into our bodies and to feel it and to be it. And that's scary.
It's something that we're not taught to do. We're taught to be extremely cognitive and extremely up in our head, which means we're not in our bodies. And so you tapped on a couple different things, which was one, we're not embodying things. We're not feeling into our bodies, which is something that I've really been incorporating, you know, and I tell my clients, like, after we're done with this session, you need to go do something physical, whether it's a bath or a walk or workout or have sex or whatever. You need to do something to integrate what we just did into your body, whatever lights you up. Maybe it's dancing around the living room, right? And the other piece of that is that you're talking about holding a neutral space while feeling our emotions. And our minds are such meaning making machines, right? Like, so we make ourselves wrong for feeling feelings. We make ourselves wrong for being human. We make ourselves, you know, we tell ourselves stories about, well, if this happened now, then it's never going to get better. And if I did this, then I must be unworthy. I must be bad. I must have deserved it, right? And so what we're doing then is we're trapping those emotions into our body and not fully allowing them to release, instead of just seeing them and going, wow, I'm really feeling sad in this moment. Mm-hmm. And how does that feel in my body? Like you were saying, like, what's the texture? What's the taste? How does my skin feel? Do I have pain in an area of my body? How's my stomach, you know? And when we don't tune into the body and we're not aware of our body, then those feelings get trapped, and then we get stuck in the stories even deeper. And then we're not able to really move out of them.
Yeah, because then that frequency of that emotion, right, will attract more of the frequency. Like, how can I find more ways to feed this addiction to this feeling? And then,
Right.
spiraling. And that's why for me, like, the energy work is such a huge piece of the coaching that I do with people. And I can't, like, today I spent like, I don't know, 3+ hours, doing energy work on my clients. And there's part of me that's like, why the hell am I doing this? Like, why do I do this? Because other coaches I know, they coach and then they have all their free time. I'm like, I coach and then do energy work, and oh wait, I have a little bit of free time, But I was saying to my friend today, we were doing some like co-working stuff, and I was like, I can't not do the energy work, like in good conscience. I can't, because I know the difference that it makes in shifting that energy in somebody, which then allows them to feel their, like, to be more intuitive, right? Because they're not, like, they don't have a lot of gunk, stuck in there to block them from actually hearing themselves.
Well, it's where your intuition leads you to go with your clients.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're committed to transformation for your clients.
Right. Yep.
And that's how you do it. So kudos to you.
Yeah. Sometimes I just wish I found a faster way to do it.
Yeah, but this is just, I think it's deeply effective. Celeste, I have a question for you. So circling back to our oracle cards, do you use them to kind of do readings for other people, or what are your feelings on that practice?
I think that I personally don't utilize them for readings on clients, but I say that, but that's so funny that just came up. I do pull a card at the beginning of every session. I do pull a card at the beginning of every session, whether it's a group session or a one-on-one session. And then I'll send them a picture of it afterwards, and I'll share with them, what I feel led from it, what the guidebook says, and all of that. But I don't do like when I think of a spread, when you say reading, I think of a spread, right? And like doing like the past and the present and the future and the different ways that people do tarot cards. And I don't do that, but I will tune in before the session and be like, okay, what do I need to know today? And what's going on in this situation, right? Like, to me, that's just part of being a conscious coach. That's part of being a conscious entrepreneur, is like, so how do I serve these people in the best and highest way? And I always with everything I do, call on 100% pure Christ consciousness energy as well, because that is the pure definition of divine love. And so to me, making sure that I'm working with the correct energies and that I'm doing it from a space of complete love and compassion. And I think like people just need to use, if they feel called to use cards, use them in the way that they feel best, right? So I don't have any preconceived notions or judgments about how people use the cards. I just know for me, I just pull one and then I feel complete with that. But again, I got my hand slapped about using them as a crutch. So
yeah. Well, so would there be anything in addition to like using them as a business, is just starting the day out with just asking, like who do I need to be? And, what does the business want to become? There's one other question I feel like you had, and I forget.
What's my next step?
Right. What's my next step? In addition to that, anything else that you think is important for somebody to know and how to use them for their business, or life?
I have two things. So one is, I think, a really important question. One of the things that I teach extensively on is we always need to release in order to receive more. So what do we need to release? So I think a really powerful question could be like whatever deck somebody feels called to utilize that question with would be really helpful. So what do I need to release in order to receive? So that can be forgiveness work. It can be physically moving, cleaning things out. It can be emotionally clearing things out. It can be lots of different things, right? I need to release money in order for more to come in, like whatever that looks like, right? But I think that that's a really powerful tool. I think the other thing, this is going a little bit more broad for life, but I also recently started tapping into and pulling a card every morning to shift my relationship with the spirit of money. Mm-hmm. Because money has a spirit as well. Money is an energy life itself. Yep. And so I felt called, like, this is the Money and the Law of Attraction card deck from Abraham Esther Hicks.
Yeah. I mean, Yes.
And so again, I had this deck and I rarely used it. And I was like, okay, well, which is the Spirit of Money deck? And it was like this one. I still have like 6 decks in here that I don't really use a lot. But it's like that curiosity of like, oh, well, when are they going to show up and when will I desire them for? But I think that asking the Spirit of Money, like, what do you have to tell me today?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want me to know? Because I'm trying to create a better relationship with you. It's just like a friend. It's like a friend that maybe, depending on your relationship with money, it could be a friend that you haven't talked to for years. It could be somebody that you try to avoid. It could be somebody that maybe you're a little bit too clingy with, right? And like trying to reset that relationship and like reset those boundaries. I think that the cards can be really, really helpful for that as well.
Yeah. I think an iteration on that sometimes I play with too. It's really the same thing, but sometimes it's just interesting to say, what am I not seeing right now? And then see what that tells you. I guess that's the same as what do I need to know, but I like kind of framing the what am I being blind to kind of, and just see what comes up there. Cause it can be interesting just tweaking the question and seeing how that influences how you read the answer.
Well, that is a different question.
Yeah.
So you would get a different answer.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's super fascinating.
And I love that. I mean, at the end of the day, like you're using your intuition to be like, what question works best for my subconscious, because we're all so different. Some of us are moving towards people. Some of us are moving away. And even like when somebody says, well, you have to do it this way, you have to use decks this way, or you have to do this, like run away, run away. I mean, yeah, there's certain ways to do exercises that are going to cause harm or not. So like, those kind of things, maybe listen to, but like when somebody's telling you that you have to run your business, this one certain way, or you have to run your life this one certain way, how do they know? Like how do they know what is, for your life? I have one last question before we wrap up. So I was on a call last night. I have this group of women that we get together every week. And I've had these hives that have been there for about almost 3 weeks now. And originally I was like, I thought it was more emotional. And then I went to my reflexologist and they said it's like liver, gallbladder detoxing stuff. And then last night on the call, like, one of the women's like, I'm hearing from spirit that it's this, like, check it that. And and throughout the whole past 2.5 weeks, different people are like, oh, well, I think it's this. I think it's this. Right. And I'm at least like at a point where I know, like, I just don't listen to anybody that I don't think, if it resonates with me, great, but otherwise, but how do you, like when somebody's first starting out in this and you have all these different people saying stuff to you, like what's something that they would need to believe, right, to stay true to themselves and to tap in just to themselves when they have lots of different messages coming from different places?
I think that first off, that's kind of my job to help them hold that space, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's so funny that you're asking me this. So I've learned in coaching, like I'm super energetically sensitive. I feel things, I hear things, I see things. I pick up other people's stuff a lot. I'm so sensitive that I will actually channel what a coach wants me to do without it being mine. Mm-hmm. Like I will just completely like give them Celeste, what do you think you should do? And I'll be like, da, 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 da. And they're like, yep, that's what I think, And I'm like, crap, that wasn't mine, Mm-hmm. And I think that it's, so I feel like my particular genius is being able to hold a really neutral space of like, I'm not going to be offended no matter what you do. I don't care. I do care, but right. I don't have any attachment to, this is a better way of saying it. I don't have any attachment to what you feel like your next step is. I trust that you're going to do exactly what you feel like you need to do. Right. And so I've had clients do things that I'm like, wow, I would never live my life that way personally, but I don't have any attachment to you living your life that way. And then maybe you're crashing and burning a little bit later. And I'm just going to remind you, but what did you learn out of this experience?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I learned a lot of really great things. That's not what I want anymore. Perfect. That's all we're doing here. We're just living and learning, and we're moving forward baby steps, right? So I think, I don't remember your exact question, but like, I think it's really important with helping people step into their intuition is just like loving them unconditionally, holding them in compassion, and understanding that we're all just doing the best we can in every given moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I heard you say is just giving them the space, right, to explore, right, and to learn, oh, when I do this, this is what I thought, and then this is what I get, and then that is how they continue to build that tool of their intuition, to know, oh, wait a minute, I felt this way before. This is kind of what happened. Do I listen to it? Do I not?
Right.
And so the oracle cards are a tool. And ultimately, right, we have the answers inside of us already. Right? And the answer that comes through the card is typically the answer that we were wanting.
Or the answer we didn't want to hear.
Yeah. I don't know if it's always the one we were wanting. Maybe not on the surface, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So just as we wrap up, any last thoughts or questions, Deb?
This has been super fascinating. I could nerd out for like 3 more hours. So
So could I.
I know. I'm like actually thinking, I kind of want to go to the store. I've been eyeballing a certain new deck that I just haven't like gone to get. And I'm like, I need to go. There's like a really, really cool bookstore here that has some just amazing decks. And I'm like, I think they're still open for an hour. I could make it.
That deck has clearly been calling you, Deb.
Yeah. Exactly.
Clearly. It's that subtle nudge, right? Like it's that very subtle, like, oh, that really caught my eye and I can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
And it's so subtle that that's what we question. Like, but I can't spend the money on that. Why would I get another deck? I don't need another deck. I'm not using the ones that I have. But that's not the truth. The truth is that deck actually wants you too, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Totally.
I have somebody gave me for my birthday this year, and it's not technically an oracle deck, but it is a deck. I don't know if you ever seen this. I love it. Since they're on Instagram, and I love the cards. Like I'm just gonna pull one out because they're basically like posts, right? And then they just have something. So here's the wound is the place where the light enters you. Okay? Pick one time in your life you've been hurt and ask how it made you golden. Did it make you more tenderhearted? Did it open you up when you were once closed down? Did that heartbreak lead to more connection with the spirit? Can you just get a little teensy tiny bit grateful for it? Fuck yeah, look at you. You're like a wounded disco ball inside.
Yeah.
They're fun because they have a little bit of sass and, makes you think. Definitely not an oracle card, but there are times when I'll pull something when I'm like, if I find myself starting to spiral and I'll pull one and I'm like, okay, like it helps me get out. Like it gets me into my head to get out of my head.
Yeah.
I
like those. That's a good, like, there's another deck that's called Affirmators and I have it somewhere. I don't know. I think it's over buried in that shelf right now. But have you seen those, Celeste, the Affirmator
no,
deck?
I haven't.
So they're funny because they have these like, unicorns and rainbows all over them. And they're hilarious because they're not so much like an oracle, but it is like affirmations, but they're so punchy and funny and like just it's kind of that like shifting your thoughts kind of thing, similar to the ones that you just shared, Heather, but they crack me up and the artwork is just goofy. And like I think those, for anybody that's thinking this oracle stuff, they're intrigued, but I don't know, it's a little too like out there for me, or you know what I mean, when you're thinking that, like go with one of these that's a little bit more just fun and kind of kitschy or whatever, because it's a good like kind of tiptoe into what that practice feels like.
Yeah.
Well, and Heather, those cards, those spiritual AF cards, when you were reading that, I'm like, these are great journaling prompts.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yep. They definitely are. Yep. They absolutely are.
Or intimacy builders with friends or your loved ones or whatever, right? Like,
yeah.
Depending on how deep you want to go, what your relationship is.
Exactly.
Yeah. They are, for sure. I have one other deck. Again, it's not an oracle deck, but it's a IM deck, and it was from Elise what the heck is it? Maybe Jones. It's a daily motivational card, but they're just like basically like I am cards like this, like I am forgiving, and it's just they're just these beautiful, like super, like I am powerful, and it's like, oh yeah, I am. Let me just be that today. So I like those too. So they're like Deb said, like they're a little bit more like just little reminders instead of like not super, on the like out there side. If you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't do this stuff because it's like the spawn of Satan. Like, no, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, like actually everything is a divination tool. Like everything is channeled.
Right. And everything's a message. I'm such a nerd for that. I'm like, everything is telling you something.
Yeah.
It's what you choose to see and how you choose to interpret it and what you choose to ignore. All of that matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It might be dropping a bomb really right at the end, but I just want to read this because, like, speaking of that, one of my girlfriends and I were talking earlier today, and we were talking about this quote. She started reading this book that I'd read last week, and talking about the whole idea that that God created everything, like good, bad, right? And there's this verse, it's Isaiah 45:7. It says, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. And she was like, how did I miss that verse? Like, she's got a degree in Bible, like, in religious studies. And she's like, how did I miss that? I'm like, yeah, me too. I'm like, but our minds, like, we're trained to only see certain things. Right. And so like to think about that God created light, dark, it's like, we don't want to think that, because at least my training was like, it's just all light. And we're just going to see what we want to see, any of us, in whatever we believe. And so why not be open to saying, hey, let me see something that I wasn't able to see before.
Yeah.
And what could this card show me? Or not. Or not.
Well, we get free will.
Exactly.
Yes, I like that. I was going to say that actually earlier, but I anytime that you especially I think with tarot more than with, as we're talking about using the oracle, but sometimes if you use the tarot to do, a past, present, future spread or whatever, if you have a question about a specific instance or a specific situation in your life, all that's technically revealing is kind of like a potential, right? Or a trajectory that you may currently be on. If you don't like what that reading gave you, change the outcome, change your habits, make a shift, right? It's just information. So
yeah.
Well, I think the key there, though, goes back to neutrality. Because sometimes we get so like, I don't want that. And we're in this resistance and this, you know what I mean? And then we're actually not able to shift out of it. We're just like pulling it to us even further. But when we can like take a step back and go, oh, well, that sounds like that would be an experience. And something different, please,
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. I mean, I tend to, if I get, there are certain cards in a traditional tarot deck that, I guess some would say have dark meanings or whatever, right? When I get those cards, I always just go, if it's the death card or whatever, maybe it's just the death of one piece of me that needs to go to heal, right? The releasing to make space for, or it doesn't mean somebody's going to die. It doesn't, you know what I mean? You don't have to be very like so extremely literal sometimes about some of those things.
Yeah. It doesn't need to be so dramatic.
Yeah.
It can literally just be the end of a chapter in some way, shape, or form in our lives. And we do. Again, what are we making the meaning out of, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are we making it mean? Death. That's so scary. But like Heather said, we're all going to die. Like,
it's the most beautiful thing in the world. Like, speaking of intuition and death, and we always Deb and I always do this. We're like, we're wrapping up, and then 10 minutes later.
I know, but the countdown's on now. We have to stop at 60.
Yeah, but when I was a kid, I remember one of my first like rememberings of like intuitive knowings was my grandmama. I was about 8, and she was in California. My mom and I flew out there. She had breast cancer, and for some reason, I was the because I have siblings. I was the one that went out, and my mom came into my room one morning, and she didn't even say anything. And I was like, Mom died, didn't she? I just knew. I just had a sense of knowing, right? And it's like when you talk about like going back to a kid, like think about it. As kids, we do have knowings. We do have sense of things. When we know when things aren't right with our parents, we know like if somebody's a bad man and we need to run the other way and not take the candy that they're offering to us when they're standing outside of a van. Like we have those intuitive knowings. It's true, right? And so just connecting back, but that goes back to the pleasure piece and allowing ourselves to experience pleasure. And that's a whole other like thing of like, do we allow ourselves, to connect back with ourselves? Because it can be scary. Because then it's like, the Marianne Williamson quote, it's like our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. Mm-hmm. And shit, that power can be scary for all of us.
Yeah.
But on that note, we'll wrap up. You're all super powerful beings. You do not need oracle cards to tell you anything, and they can be a fun tool. Like Celeste said, using them in your business to just ask each day, like, who do you want me to become? Who do you want to become? Like asking the business that, what actions to take, have fun with it. Don't just allow it to be fun and light, and you'll get the answers that you need. So thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. And we will see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.